I still remember the exact shade of beige on the walls of my father-in-law's dining room that Sunday afternoon in 1998. The Oakland Hills stretched out beyond the window, but no one was admiring the view. The men were huddled around the TV watching football while we women cleared the dishes. My husband David's family dinners always followed the same script. "So, Eleanor, how's domestic life treating you?" my father-in-law asked when I returned to collect the gravy boat. His tone was pleasant. "Enough, but I'd learned to read between the lines. It's good, Richard. Actually, I've been thinking about taking some coding classes at..." "Coding?" he chuckled, exchanging glances with David. "Honey, you've got your hands full with Tommy and the house. Besides, that computer stuff is really more suited to, well, you know, to men." I finished for him. An uncomfortable silence fell. My mother-in-law quickly changed the subject. Later that night, after tucking our 5-year-old son into bed, I sat alone at our kitchen table with my old Gateway computer humming in front of me. David was working late again at his Silicon Valley startup, a world that seemed perpetually closed to me despite my mathematics degree from UCLA gathering dust. I opened a browser and typed, "Learn to code online." It was a small act of rebellion, but one that would change everything. The next morning, I drove Tommy to kindergarten. As I waited in the parent pickup line that afternoon, I chatted with May, another mum whose husband worked at Oracle. "I've been thinking about getting back into tech," I confessed, the first time I'd said it aloud to anyone. She looked surprised. "Really? Weren't you just a secretary or something before, Tommy?" "I have a math degree," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I worked as a systems analyst for 2 years before having Tommy." "Oh," she said, clearly not knowing how to respond. "Well, good luck with that. It's a young man's game now, especially with all those new startups." I smiled politely, but inside something hardened. I'd heard enough dismissals. That night, I signed up for my first online Java course. I didn't tell David, not because he would. Forbid it, he wasn't that type of husband, but because I knew exactly what he would say. The same things he always said when I talked about career aspirations. "There's no shame in being a homemaker, Ellie." Or, "Tommy needs his mother right now." Instead, I carved out my own secret world between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. after everyone was asleep. 5 hours a night, every night for months on end. Java, then Python, databases, UI, UX principles. While David climbed the corporate ladder and Tommy grew an inch taller, I built my foundation in silence. By the time our second child was born in 2000, I had created my first app, a simple tool to help parents track their children's developmental milestones. I published it under the name E.L. Parker, not Eleanor Langley Parker, a small deception that felt necessary in a world where women founders received less than 3% of venture capital. My tiny app wasn't meant to change the world, but sometimes revolutions start with whispers. The early 2000s were a strange time to be building a tech business in secret. The dot-com bubble had burst, sending shockwaves through Silicon Valley. David's startup had narrowly survived, but the stress lines around his eyes deepened. Our conversations over dinner became briefer, centered mostly around the children and household matters. Meanwhile, my parent app had gained a modest but dedicated following. I'd expanded it to include a community feature where parents could connect and share advice, something that set it apart from other tracking apps on the market. "You're on that computer a lot these days," David remarked one evening, loosening his tie as he walked into our home office. I quickly minimized my screen showing user metrics. "Just connecting with other moms," I said. Not entirely a lie. He nodded, absently. "Well, don't stay up too late. Tommy has soccer in the morning and Sarah has that pediatrician appointment at 11. I was running on 4 hours of sleep most nights, juggling the demands of 2 children during the day and coding after hours. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was living the exact housewife life everyone expected, while simultaneously building something entirely for myself. My breakthrough came unexpectedly. A popular parenting blog featured my app, praising its intuitive design and community features. Downloads jumped from hundreds to thousands overnight, then tens of thousands. I needed help. Managing server loads and customer queries was becoming impossible alone. That's when I met Raj online, a brilliant developer in San Jose who was between jobs. After signing an NDA, he became the first person to know my secret. "This is impressive work for a solo developer," he said during our first video call. "I'm scanning my code repository. I'm not exactly what people expect when they picture a tech founder," I admitted. "Their loss," he shrugged. "This application architecture is elegant. What's your scaling strategy?" For the first time, someone was talking to me like a legitimate tech entrepreneur, not a housewife with a hobby. It was intoxicating. With Raj's help, I incorporated as Parker Technologies, LLC. My home address was listed for the paperwork, but I rented a P.O. box for business mail. I set up a separate bank account with my business funds. David was so absorbed in his own career challenges that he never noticed the extra income, modest at first, but growing steadily as we introduced a premium tier. By 2004, Parker Technologies had 5 remote employees, none of whom had ever met me in person. I managed them all from the same desk where I helped Tommy with his multiplication tables and planned Sarah's birthday parties. The real test came when TechCrunch reached out for an interview with the mysterious E.L. Parker after our user base hit 1 million. I had avoided press until then, but remaining completely anonymous was becoming unsustainable. I agreed to a phone interview, lowering my voice slightly and allowing my natural confidence about the product to overcome my nerves. "Your company has carved out an impressive niche," the reporter said. "Do you see yourself competing with the larger family tech platforms?" I looked at the framed photo on my desk, myself in an apron at Sarah's 3rd birthday, the perfect picture of domestic bliss. "We're not just building features," I replied. "We're building understanding, and sometimes the most revolutionary insights come from unexpected places." The article ran with the headline, "The Enigmatic Founder Revolutionizing Family Tech." No photo, just a silhouette icon next to my abbreviated name. That evening I found David reading the article on his laptop. "Have you seen this, Ellie?" he asked. "This guy's company sounds a lot like that app you use for the kids. Pretty impressive stuff." I smiled as I handed him his coffee. "Really, I'll have to check it out." By 2008, maintaining my double life had become nearly impossible. Parker Technologies had grown to a team of 28 people, with offices in San Francisco that I had never actually visited. Our family app had expanded into a comprehensive platform for child development, education, and family health, generating 4.2 million in annual revenue. I had a COO who handled day-to-day operations, Jessica, a former Silicon Valley executive who had left the rat race after her own children were born. She was the only person who knew my complete truth, and she found it both hilarious and inspiring. "You realize you've built an 8-figure company between school runs and soccer practice, right?" she said during one of our weekly calls. I was sitting in my car outside Tommy's middle school, waiting for band practice to finish. "Sometimes I can't believe it myself." "The board is pushing for more public appearances from the founder," Jessica said, her tone careful. "The mystery CEO angle worked for a while, but for this next funding round, I watched as parents began to gather outside the school. Among them was Lisa Chen, a venture capitalist whose firm had ironically rejected Parker Technologies' seed. Round years earlier, not knowing the founder was often sitting across from her at PTA meetings. "I know," I sighed. "It's time." That night, I finally told David. We sat on our back deck after the children went to bed, the Silicon Valley lights twinkling below us. I'd rehearsed this moment countless times, but nothing prepared me for the look of utter disbelief on his face as I methodically explained how I'd built a multi-million-dollar company right under his nose. Parker Technologies is you, he repeated, his coffee growing cold. All this time? Yes, but how? When? We have children, a household. I worked while you slept, while you traveled for business, during playgroups and soccer practices, in every spare moment for 8 years. His expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally something that looked suspiciously like awe. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly. The question hung in the night air. We both knew the answer, but saying it aloud would change everything between us. "Because," I finally said, "the day I told your father I wanted to take coding classes, you laughed along with him. And every time I mentioned going back to tech, you reminded me that my place was with the children." He flinched as though I'd struck him. "I never meant to limit you, Ellie. I know, but you did. So I built this anyway." The coming weeks were a whirlwind. When I finally walked into the Parker Technologies offices as their founder, the looks of shock on my employees' faces were priceless. Most had pictured E.L. Parker as a young tech bro, not a 40-year-old mother of 2 in a cardigan. The press had a field day. Housewife secretly built tech empire while family had no idea. The headlines made me cringe, but they also helped us secure $30 million in Series B funding, our largest round yet. During my first official company all-hands, I addressed the elephant in the room. Yes, I built this company in secret, not because I'm ashamed of being a mother and wife, but because I refused to let those roles be the only things that defined me. Parker Technologies exists because sometimes the people who understand a problem best are the ones society has taught to be invisible. What I didn't say was how terrified I had been, not of failure, but of success. Of disrupting the life I'd carefully maintained, of disappointing the people who thought they knew exactly who I was and what I was capable of. That night, as I tucked Sarah into bed, she looked up at me thoughtfully. "Mom, Kayla at school said you're famous now. She said you're a girl boss." Her nose wrinkled at the term. I smiled. "What do you think about that?" She considered for a moment. "I think you're just Mom. But also, it's pretty cool that you made something important that helps people. From the mouths of babes." Perhaps that was the legacy that mattered most, showing my daughter that women don't have to choose between family and ambition. That sometimes the most powerful move is building something remarkable while the world underestimates you. The 2010s brought explosive growth for Parker Technologies. What began as a simple parenting app evolved into an integrated platform for family wellness, education, and development that served over 15 million users worldwide. In 2014, we launched Parker Health, expanding into telehealth services for families. By 2016, we'd added Parker Learn, an adaptive educational technology platform designed to support diverse learning styles. Each expansion was driven by insights I'd gathered not in boardrooms, but in living rooms, at school events, and during countless conversations with parents navigating the same challenges I faced. David had become one of my biggest supporters. Though our marriage required significant recalibration, he joined a smaller company with less travel, taking on more family responsibilities as my public role expanded. The man who once couldn't imagine his wife as a tech founder now proudly introduced himself as Eleanor Parker's husband at industry events. My father-in-law Richard struggled more with the revelation. At a family dinner, now hosted at our considerably larger home in Palo Alto, he awkwardly raised his glass. "To Eleanor," he said stiffly, "who certainly proved me wrong." I clinked my glass against his. To learning that potential doesn't fit neatly into boxes, but the greatest transformation wasn't in my family or even my company. It was in myself. The woman who had once hidden her ambitions now regularly spoke on panels about women in tech. The mother who coded in secret now openly brought her children to the office, showing them that work and family could coexist. In 2018, Parker Technologies went public in an IPO valued at $1.2 billion. Standing on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, I watched as our stock symbol, PRNT, lit up the boards. 20 years after that conversation at my father-in-law's dining table, I had built something undeniable. Tommy, now in college, and Sarah, a confident teenager, stood beside me as we rang the opening bell. "We're really proud of you, Mom," Tommy said afterward, in a rare moment of teenage sincerity. I squeezed his hand. "The best part is that you both got to see it happen." In the years since, I've invested heavily in female-founded startups, particularly those started by mothers. My venture fund, Hidden Potential Capital, specifically seeks out founders who might be overlooked by traditional VC firms, women balancing careers with caregiving, people of color, those without Ivy League pedigrees or Silicon Valley connections. Last month, a young mother pitched me her healthcare app with a sleeping baby strapped to her chest. She apologized 3 times during her presentation when the baby stirred. "Never apologize for being a complete person," I told her afterward. Some of the best ideas in tech come from the messy, beautiful complexity of lives being fully lived. I think often about what would have happened if I'd accepted the limitations others placed on me. If I'd believed that motherhood and ambition were opposing forces rather than complementary powers. The greatest empires aren't always built with fanfare and proclamations. Sometimes they're built in quiet moments, in the spaces between responsibilities, by people who refuse to be defined by others' expectations. 2025, 7 years later. The autonomous car glided silently through the Palo Alto morning as I reviewed quarterly projections on my tablet. At 55, I'd grown comfortable with my dual identity. Eleanor Parker, tech mogul and grandmother. Of 3, "You have arrived at Stanford University," announced the car's pleasant voice. I stepped out into the California sunshine, pausing to straighten my blazer before walking toward the computer science building. The campus hadn't changed much since I'd been a guest lecturer here 5 years ago, but the world of tech had transformed dramatically. The dean greeted me at the entrance. "The students are beyond excited, Ms. Parker. Your story has become required. Reading in our Disruption and Innovation course." I smiled. "Let's hope they're taking notes on the business strategy and not just the dramatic reveal." The lecture hall fell silent as I approached the podium. 500 faces looked back at me, remarkably more diverse than the tech conferences I'd attended in my early days. My journey from secret coder to public CEO has been well documented, I began, but today I want to talk about what happened after the headlines faded and the novelty wore off. I clicked to my first slide, a graph showing the percentage of venture funding going to female founders over the past 20 years. The line had risen from a dismal 2.8% to a still inadequate 17%. Progress is happening, I continued, but true revolution isn't measured in single success stories or incremental improvements. It's measured in systems transformed. The real story of the past 7 years hadn't been in Parker Technologies' continued growth, though that had been substantial. Our telehealth platform now served over 60 million users worldwide, and our education technology was being used in school districts across 12 countries. The real story was what had happened when success gave me a platform. 3 years ago, I'd made the controversial decision to step down as CEO of Parker Technologies to focus on what I called structural redesign work. I wanted to address the systems that had made my secret building necessary in the first place. Hidden Potential Capital has now funded over 300 female-founded companies, I told the students, but writing checks, while essential, isn't enough. I clicked to the next slide showing the Opportunity Access Initiative, the non-profit I'd founded with Sarah, now a brilliant 25-year-old with degrees in both computer science and social policy. The organization provided childcare centers in tech hubs, parental leave advocacy, and remote work infrastructure for caregivers. The most revolutionary act isn't succeeding despite barriers, I said. It's removing those barriers entirely. After the lecture, a young woman approached me, a baby carrier strapped to her chest. "I almost didn't come today," she admitted. "My childcare fell through, and I was embarrassed to bring my daughter to a professional event." I reached out to steady the carrier as she adjusted her backpack. "What's your field?" "Quantum computing," she said. "I'm developing algorithms for protein folding analysis." "And you thought motherhood might derail that work?" She nodded, eyes downcast. 25 years ago it might have," I said honestly. "But look around." I gestured to the lecture hall, where at least a dozen students had children with them. The JE University now provided drop-in childcare for lectures and had established a parent-scholar housing complex with built-in support systems. "Your generation won't have to choose between contribution and care," I told her, "because mine fought to make both possible." Later that afternoon, I visited the headquarters of my newest venture, the Parker Institute for Augmented Care. The building stood on the same block where I'd once sat in my car during Tommy's band practice. Dreaming of a different life, the Institute combined AI, telehealth technology, and human support networks to revolutionize caregiving, whether for children, aging parents, or those with chronic conditions. It was the culmination of everything. I'd learned about the invisible work that held families and communities together. Tommy, now a physician, led the medical research division. Sarah headed technological development, and David, semi-retired at 60, managed community implementation. We'd come full circle. The family that once unknowingly gave me space to build in secret now worked openly alongside me. That evening, we gathered for dinner in my home, the same one where I'd revealed my secret company to David 17 years earlier. 3 generations around one table. My 5-year-old granddaughter, Maya, climbed into my lap as I checked messages on my phone. "Grandma, Mommy says you built computers when everyone thought you were just making cookies." I laughed. "Not exactly, though I did make excellent cookies too." She considered this solemnly. "I want to build things and make cookies." "That's the whole point, sweetheart," I said, hugging her close. "You won't have to choose." Later, after everyone had gone, I sat alone on the back deck, looking out at the Silicon Valley lights. The tech landscape had changed enormously since my early coding days: quantum computing, neural interfaces, ambient AI, but human potential remained as vastly underestimated as ever. My phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "Lab breakthrough. The caregiver support algorithm is showing 87% accuracy in predictive intervention. We're changing the game, Mom." I smiled at the mix of technical jargon and enthusiasm so characteristic of my daughter. She'd never had to hide her ambitions or code in secret. She'd grown up seeing her mother build something extraordinary, watching the blueprint of possibility expand before her eyes. Perhaps that was the real empire I'd built, not Parker Technologies, or Hidden Potential Capital, or even the Parker Institute. The true legacy was the generation of builders who would never know the limitations that once seemed so insurmountable. They would face new challenges, of course, different barriers, novel forms of resistance, but they would face them openly, with support structures we'd fought to establish, standing on foundations we'd poured in those quiet, determined hours. Revolution doesn't always announce itself with manifestos and marches. Sometimes it happens in kitchens after bedtime, in car pickup lines, in the spaces between responsibilities. Sometimes the most profound change comes from those society has taught to be invisible, quietly rebuilding the World to accommodate the fullness of human potential. My name is Eleanor Parker. I built a tech empire between diaper changes and math homework, and in doing so helped ensure that future generations will build theirs in the light. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to our channel for more inspiring narratives that challenge conventions and celebrate hidden potential. New chapters of extraordinary lives uploaded every week. Click the notification bell so you don't miss our next story of transformation against all odds.